Welcome back. Well, Harvard is now declaring that your gender can change from day to day.
The school's Office of BGLTQ Student Life now fighting transphobia with a pamphlet laying out the concept that gender is, quote, fluid and ever-changing, and that transphobic misinformation is a form of systemic violence.
All right, so it raises a number of questions. Is this just promoting intolerance, for example, in the name of tolerance? Here to discuss it more is a blogger at The Conservative Millennial, Allie Stuckey. Good to see you, Allie. What do you make of this?
Thanks for having me. Well, we don't even have to go into the complexities of the transgender agenda to see that this guide is wrong. Harvard is supposed to be a place of intellectual and intelligent and productive discourse, and this guide stands in direct opposition to that. Because what they're saying is you don't just have to think the way that we do politically or intellectually, you have to feel the way that we do, and that's moral manipulation. They're saying that if you do not believe what we do, then you are morally and ethically wrong, you're a bad person. And that's a scary place to be for a center of higher education that's supposed to be producing critical thinking.
Well, speaking of free speech, Ann Coulter is getting an experience of that at the moment, where she was supposed to speak at Berkeley University. Then it was canceled because they couldn't protect her. Now they're saying, well, we actually do want you to come speak. Well, the Young Americans Foundation is suing Berkeley for not protecting Ann Coulter in her speech.
Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. There is new concern tonight that Iran may be more involved than we think in a nuclear weapons program, despite its agreement with the U.S. and other Western nations. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen tells us the information comes from a group that has been right about this kind of thing before.
We're revealing this for the first time today.
Members of an Iranian dissident group use satellite imagery and intelligence purportedly derived from informants inside the Iranian military to support the startling claim that far from complying with the terms of the nuclear deal, as Secretary of State Rex Tillerson certified to Congress earlier this week, Iran is grossly violating the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA.
We're talking about an extensive covert operation by the Iranian regime. Our information shows that their activities have been continuing in full gear despite the JCPOA.
The group said Iran is covertly pursuing what nuclear experts call weaponization, experimenting with things like triggering devices and high explosives at this newly constructed site on the sprawling military base at Parchin. UN inspectors have received only the most limited and tightly controlled access to Parchin. The newly disclosed site carries the ominous name Plan 6.
They are not living up to the spirit of the agreement, I can tell you that.
One day after President Trump effectively accused Tehran of cheating, his aides treated the latest allegation with caution. On the one hand, NCRI is affiliated with MEK, a group that spent 15 years on the State Department's list of foreign terrorist organizations. Yet NCRI also boasts an undeniable track record of exposing secret Iranian nuclear sites.
Two Michigan doctors and the wife of one of the doctors have been charged with performing a female genital mutilation procedure on two 7-year-old girls in the first federal case involving the banned procedure filed in the United States. 53-year-old Dr. Fakhruddin Attar and his wife, 50-year-old Farida Attar, were arrested Friday at their medical office in Livonia, Michigan, west of Detroit. The defendants belong to a religious and cultural community that investigators allege practices female genital mutilation on young girls. It is a painful surgical procedure to remove part of the clitoris or clitoral hood to suppress female sexuality.
The 47th Earth Day on Saturday was marked by hundreds of rallies around the world to support the sciences and defend climate research that the White House is threatening to no longer fund. Alaska may be ground zero for these budget cuts. With temperatures soaring last winter to 50 degrees above normal, the area around the North Pole is melting, and the Arctic sea ice is shrinking at a rate never seen before. Utqiagvik, Alaska, which was once called Barrow, is the farthest northern city in the U.S. It's also the site of a lonely outpost where NOAA monitors the Arctic sea ice. In some areas, ice that was once 9 feet thick is now as thin as 3 feet. The warming Arctic is causing the jet stream to wobble across America and helping spawn massive weather events. As America's weather becomes more destructive, early warning systems become more critical. But scientists could lose vital tools like climate monitoring satellites under the Trump administration's proposed budget cuts. In Alaska, warmer temperatures are melting the permafrost, and villages are literally disappearing. Scientists say that today's Alaska serves as a warning for what climate change will mean in the future for the rest of America.
Heightened concern on the Korean Peninsula. Ambiguous activity near a known DPRK nuclear test site. Tuesday is the 85th anniversary of the Korean People's Army, the type of occasion when Pyongyang has been known to launch missiles or even test nuclear weapons. Another concern, the continuing military buildup in almost every direction. To the north, China's military is conducting training drills on the border. The National Defense Ministry says they are routine.
China believes the international community has definitely seen Chinese peaceful efforts to resolve the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula since the issue broke out.
Also to the north, reports that Moscow is moving troops and equipment closer to the DPRK border. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met his Russian counterpart to discuss the situation. The Kremlin says social media footage of troop movements in Russia's far eastern military district are part of scheduled maneuvers. To the south, Seoul and Washington continue annual military exercises that infuriate Pyongyang and have in the past provoked threats and missile tests.
Lots of strategic assets are also deployed to the Korean Peninsula because of the ROK U.S. military drills.
As a precaution, the U.S. Air Force has sent extra assets to the region, including a plane that can detect debris from a nuclear blast. The U.S. Navy also says the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group is now on its way to the Korean Peninsula.
Authorities dropped nearly 36 cases last month that stemmed from arrests of protesters against the Dakota Access crude oil pipeline. Prosecutors and judges dropped the 33 misdemeanor cases, while another 14 were resolved by guilty pleas. Most of the cases dropped last month related to criminal trespass charges from the late summer and fall. Prosecutors struggled to prove those charges before Judge Alan Schmallenberger, who ruled in multiple cases that the Morton County State's Attorney Office had failed to meet its burden of providing that protesters were given proper notice that they were on private land, either with signs or verbal warnings. Demonstrators staged months of protests near the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota to try to stop the $3.8 billion four-state pipeline, saying it will pollute water and damage Native American sacred sites. Dallas-based Energy Transfer Partners, which built the line, says it's safe. According to the Joint Information Center, 761 arrests were made during the protests. Reuters reports that a draft document has shown that the European Union is considering legislative measures on how online platforms, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Google, take down hate speech and incitement to violence. The European Commission says there is a high degree of variation in the approaches taken to removal of illegal content. The Commission says it may come forward with legislative measures to address the legal fragmentation and uncertainty related to the removal of illegal content by online platforms.
And there has been a series of suspicious fires during the last 2 or 3 weeks. I can tell the arsonist, you see this fire, it's hot. We're going to be a lot hotter on you until we get you in jail.
You could hear their law enforcement in Polk County, Florida, voicing some serious threats. This after a suspicious fire spreads to more than 600 acres in a matter of days. Fire and rescue teams have asked hundreds to evacuate. In the meantime, the American Red Cross has opened shelters for the community while fire teams work to save their homes and businesses. Investigators, as you heard there, also working tirelessly to find the alleged arsonist. This has been one of a series of suspicious fires starting in just the past few weeks.
With predictions that some 50,000 demonstrators might besiege the AFD Congress, police set up their own blockade. 4,000 riot police preventing protesters from approaching the venue. Isolated scuffles were quickly dealt with, but there were injuries on both sides.
It's a strange situation in Germany that a democratic party that is elected in a democratic way and wants to decide on a democratic program that they need to be protected by police. That is not democratic and does not give us much hope for the federal elections.
Cologne prides itself on being a liberal, multicultural city, and the AfD's decision to convene here has been interpreted by some as a deliberate provocation.
Here are many different ways that people are protesting against the AfD, from the blockades to the carnival people, and that clearly shows that we've broad support from many different levels of society. People are happy to show that they want something else instead of the AfD.
The AfD was formed in 2013 and gained significant ground in 2015 with its uncompromising populist anti-immigrant stance. But individual leaders have also publicly promoted neo-Nazi ideas and neo-Nazi language.
Pushing back against what they say are mounting attacks on science, scientists worldwide left their labs and took to the streets Saturday, along with students and research advocates. The March for Science coincides with Earth Day. It was set for more than 500 cities anchored in Washington, D.C., and to be joined by dozens of nonpartisan scientific professional societies. Turnout intended to combine political and how-to science demonstrations. Rockefeller University's Eric Jarvis told CBS News, when the first time in recorded history scientists have to get together to form a march in support of science, something serious is going on.
Welcome back. Well, which organization is more dangerous to Americans, ISIS or the NRA? Well, that was the question posed by one professor emeritus at the University of Missouri.
George Kennedy's comments sparking some outrage from Second Amendment advocates, as you might suspect, and gun owners. One of them joins us now.
That's right. Fox News contributor, radio show host, David Webb. What do you think about this, Professor?
Morning.
Well, wow. First of all, this is a false premise. They love to set up these arguments where ISIS is more dangerous than the NRA, and it's a numbers game. Only so many people have been killed by terrorism. By the way, this professor talks about 9 deaths. I would remind him that Orlando, the nightclub, was 48 plus the terrorist, and San Bernardino, add the numbers up. Fort Hood was a terrorist attack. So he's not even right on his numbers. But the idea is to set up a false argument and draw us into it. So here's what I'm saying to America. Don't get drawn into it. It's not relative one to the other.
A French election already filled with emotion and controversy could now have even more unpredictability after another terror attack in Paris. First, what we know about the shooting of 3 police officers and a German tourist, then how next week's election stacks up tonight. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott in Paris tonight.
The Champs-Élysées in Paris today after terror once again struck France. A man with an AK-47 shooting at a police van, killing 1 officer, seriously injuring 2 others, and hurting a tourist. When he fled, police fired off rounds of shots, hitting and killing him.
Barbarism and cowardice struck Paris last night, as it has elsewhere in Europe.
The man police say is responsible, 39-year-old Karim Shirfi, a French native but with a lengthy record. Police say he served 14 years in jail for 4 sentences, including attempted attacks on police. They claim he showed no signs of radicalization in jail and was not on a terror watch list. And along with other weapons in his car and information on other police headquarters, a handwritten note defending ISIS was found on his body. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack. This family looked terror straight in the eyes. John Finney and Angela Maggard from Kentucky were in Paris with their 3 children, marking their 30th anniversary.
Just across from the White House, scientists, researchers, and their supporters turned out to attend teach-ins and hear speakers who warned that science itself was under attack.
I am here today because I embrace all of science.
The demonstration was billed as apolitical, but the placards and the rhetoric were plainly aimed at President Donald Trump for his proposals to boost military spending at the expense of the government's medical and basic research initiatives. And they accused his administration of trying to censor proof of global warming.
They are scrubbing climate change from federal websites and ordering federal employees not to use the words global warming in any communication. This is not conservative politics. This is the Inquisition gunning for Galileo.
For those who remain skeptical or, like Trump, have called climate change a Chinese hoax, this Nobel Prize-winning physicist says the evidence is now overwhelming.
And there's a few % chance that maybe human activity is not causing climate change. But for my money, that's good enough odds that we better do something about it.
Others were concerned about the threat to medical research programs at the National Institutes of Health.
This administration is actually trying to cut NIH funding by a significant amount, and we just want to make sure that Congress stays strong.
Turning out in force on a weekend is one thing. Now it's up to these advocates for science to press their message to members of Congress who will be judging the president's budget priorities. Tom Ackerman, Al Jazeera, Washington.
President Donald Trump's travel ban on citizens of 6 Muslim-majority nations faces its second challenge at a U.S. appeals court next month. More Republican states are backing the measure. One Democratic state attorney general has dropped out of the legal fight this week. According to legal experts, the state's realignment could signal that the changes made last month to Trump's original executive order were enough to strengthen the government's case. 16 Democratic state attorneys general and the District of Columbia on Thursday filed a friend of the court brief backing Hawaii in its bid to block the March 6th executive order. 2 federal judges had put the order on hold before it could be implemented.
Scientists around the world fear the march of progress has slowed.
Climate change, vaccines, medical aid for not only in the United States but overseas.
That is especially their concern here in the U.S., where President Donald Trump has called climate change a hoax, and the head of his Environmental Protection Agency disagrees with 97% of scientists that global warming is largely caused by humans.
I believe the ability to measure with precision the degree of human activity's impact on the climate is subject to more debate.
The Trump administration has proposed slashing budgets for environmental protection, research, and scientific education.
In the first budget that President Trump has put forward, he's called for some fairly substantial cuts to some of our key science agencies, and that does worry me and many of my colleagues.
So just as millions in the International Women's March unfurled their banner, their hats anyway, across the globe on Trump's inauguration day, researchers, educators, and scientists of all stripes chose Earth Day for an international science march. And like the women's marchers, they've even found their own hat, a brain cap, fittingly.
What we really want to do is make science more human. Science affects everyone. Whether you're looking at cancer studies to our technological advancements with iPhones and the Apple Watch, whether you're looking at climate change or mental health studies.
The marchers point to the science that found a vaccine for polio and, more darkly, the atomic bomb.
Reuters reports that on Saturday, wildfires in Florida have destroyed 9 homes in drought-stricken areas. Evacuation orders have been triggered for about 2,000 other residences. Governor Rick Scott declared a state of emergency on April 11th because of continual dry conditions in Florida. National Guard troops were deployed to help residents get to safety on Saturday, as he also authorized the use of 5 Black Hawk helicopters to help fight the fire. The fire, which began on Thursday, has only been contained up to 10%, forcing residents to evacuate immediately.
The Ministry of Health and the Gaza Strip warned this week that Gaza's hospitals are running out of fuel to power facilities. Doctors at the Al-Shifa hospital said the disruptions are putting the lives of patients at risk, especially in the renal dialysis ward, where patients with kidney problems are being treated.
The disruption of power and the shortage of fuel at the Al-Shifa hospital affects the functioning of the dialysis unit and puts patients' lives at risk in a way which may cause their death.
Gaza's lone power plant shut down earlier this month, leaving more than 2 million residents with barely 4 hours of electricity a day. The United Nations recently warned the latest power crisis could be the tipping point that makes the Strip unlivable.
Within 1 week, the hospitals, for most of them, should lack of fuel. It means that the hospitals will have no choice but to close essential services, partially or totally. Patients, men, women, children, should not pay the price with their health or with their life for the current crisis.
Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have blamed each other for the energy shortage. Hamas says it can't afford to buy more fuel due to the heavy taxes imposed by the government, while the Palestinian Authority claims that Hamas officials are simply incapable of running the plant efficiently. In the middle of the dispute, citizens in Gaza will continue to pay the price for the long-running dispute indefinitely.